Welcome to Echoes of Ihsan, the podcast where we take a deep dive into Islamic texts and traditions. And today we're going to be looking at the Muwatta Imam Malik, specifically Book 42, which focuses on drinks.
Oh, that seems really interesting.
Yeah, and it gives us this really fascinating kind of glimpse into how early Islamic scholars, they viewed beverages,
Uh-huh.
especially in light of Islamic principles. Like, how do you approach just the simple act of having a drink through the lens of Islamic law and tradition?
Yeah, it's like almost like opening a time capsule, right? We get to see how everyday practices, even something as simple as, like you said, having a drink, were examined and understood, within that framework of Islamic law. And it's fascinating to see how they approach that.
And it's not just about, these dry rules and regulations, right?
No.
But it's really like a journey into the social and ethical and even spiritual considerations that shaped those rulings. And what I found particularly interesting was the book section on wine. It doesn't shy away from addressing like all the complexities surrounding it.
Yeah, the Muwatta's approach to wine is really illuminating. It doesn't just simply state the prohibition,
Right.
but it really kind of delves into like the rationale behind it, the historical context, and like the implications for individuals, but also for the community.
Yeah.
So it really shows that depth and nuance of Islamic jurisprudence.
Absolutely. So the book starts by discussing the had, which is the specific punishment in Islamic law for drinking wine. Now, for our listeners who might not be familiar with the concept of had, it refers to this category of punishments for certain crimes that are fixed and mandatory,
Right.
as opposed to punishments that are like left to the discretion of judges.
Exactly, yeah. The had is like a fundamental aspect of Islamic criminal law. And it's rooted in this idea that certain offenses are so grave that they require this predetermined punishment to, ensure justice and deter others from committing similar acts. So in the case of wine, the had serves to really underline like the seriousness with which Islam views intoxication.
And speaking of, the had for drinking wine, there's this really captivating story about Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph of Islam, who's incredibly meticulous, right, about upholding Islamic law, even in situations that might seem kind of minor.
Yeah.
So the Muwatta recounts this incident where Umar smelled wine on someone's breath.
Oh, wow.
And he immediately launched this investigation to determine if a had offense had been committed.
That's really, I mean, the story really showcases, Umar's commitment to justice, right? And his understanding of the importance of upholding Islamic law, no matter how small it might seem,
Yeah.
And it also highlights how seriously early Muslims took, the issue of intoxication.
Yeah.
Like seeing it as a matter that required careful scrutiny and a firm response.
Yeah, and it's amazing how this seemingly simple incident really led to this pivotal moment in Islamic jurisprudence, right?
Yeah.
So the Muwatta tells us that Umar consulted with Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was, renowned for his wisdom and deep knowledge of Islamic teachings. And together, they discussed the appropriate punishment for drinking wine, ultimately setting the had at 80 lashes.
And it's really interesting how Ali reasons for the punishment, right? He links it to the potential harms caused by intoxication. He argued that drinking leads to, inebriation.
Of course.
And that can lead to slurred speech, loss of inhibition, and ultimately even false accusations or lies, right? So the had, therefore, wasn't just about punishing the act of drinking itself,
Right.
but it was aiming to address the potential social and moral transgressions that could result from intoxication.
That's such an insightful perspective. It shows how, Islamic law wasn't just about these arbitrary rules, but was very deeply connected to ethical considerations.
Yeah.
And the well-being of the community.
Exactly. It highlights the importance of considering the consequences of actions,
Yeah.
not just the actions themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not just like, oh, I did this thing. It's like, what are the ripple effects of this action?
Precisely. And this story really, it underscores how Islamic jurisprudence, it sought to establish a just and balanced society where individual actions were really understood in relation to their impact on the broader community.
Right.
So the had for wine drinking, it reflects this deep concern for preserving social harmony and moral integrity.
It really makes you realize how much thought and deliberation went into shaping these early Islamic rulings.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about blindly following rules,
Yeah.
but about understanding the wisdom and ethical considerations behind them.
Yeah.
Now, the Muwatta also mentions a difference in the had for wine drinking between free men and slaves.
Right. So the text states that for the same offense, a slave would receive like half the punishment of a free man. And while this distinction might seem, kind of jarring to modern sensibilities, it's important to remember the historical context, right, in which these rulings were made. So slavery, unfortunately, was a prevalent institution at the time.
Yeah.
And Islamic law, it sought to address its realities while gradually working towards its abolition.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reminder that when studying historical texts, we need to consider the social and cultural norms of that time,
Yeah.
even if they differ from our own values today.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the historical context without necessarily condoning those practices.
Exactly. It's about approaching these texts with like intellectual honesty.
Right. Yeah.
Recognizing both the progressive and the problematic aspects of that historical context. And our goal is to understand and to learn and to draw like meaningful insights while also acknowledging the evolution of social and moral values over time.
I completely agree with that.
And speaking of like specific rulings, there's another really fascinating point made by Yahya bin Said and Imam Malik himself. They emphasize that the had for drinking wine is obligatory, regardless of the amount consumed or the level of intoxication.
Right. So this really highlights, I think, the absolute prohibition of wine in Islam, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about moderation or controlled consumption.
Right.
But the very act itself is considered a transgression,
Right.
regardless of the quantity or the resulting, level of inebriation.
So it's not about getting tipsy or having just one glass.
Right.
The ruling really draws this firm line.
Yes.
It makes it very clear that any consumption of wine is stepping over that line.
And it leaves no room for ambiguity or personal interpretation when it comes to this specific issue.
And it underscores the emphasis on clarity and certainty.
Yes.
In Islamic law.
Uh-huh.
Right? When it comes to matters that are deemed haram, the rulings are often very definitive,
Right.
leaving little space for individual judgment or situational exceptions.
And that, I think, really aims to provide clear guidance,
right,
and prevent, potential loopholes,
right,
that could undermine the intended moral and social objectives.
Now, moving on from the topic of wine, the Muwatta, it delves into another really interesting area, which is nabis.
Okay.
So could you explain what nabis is and why it's mentioned in this book about drinks?
So nabis is basically a non-alcoholic drink made from, soaking dates or grapes in water.
Yeah.
It was a common beverage in the Arabian Peninsula, during the Prophet's time. And it continues to be enjoyed in some regions today.
Interesting.
And, it's interesting that the Muwatta, it dedicates this, significant portion to discussing nabis, specifically outlining, certain restrictions regarding its preparation.
It might seem surprising that a book discussing drinks would focus on a non-alcoholic beverage.
Yeah.
Especially after such a detailed discussion on, the prohibition of wine.
Exactly. But this, I think, really reflects a key aspect of Islamic teachings, right?
Yeah.
Which is this holistic approach to life.
Right.
That extends even to seemingly mundane matters.
Right. Right.
So Islam doesn't just focus on, prohibiting the haram, but it also provides guidance on the halal, encouraging Muslims to be mindful and intentional, even in their, everyday choices.
Yeah.
So the discussion on nabis, it demonstrates this attention to detail, reminding us that Islamic principles, they can inform even the simplest acts, like preparing a drink.
So what are some of the specific restrictions that are mentioned regarding nabis?
So the Muwatta, it specifically mentions certain containers that were forbidden for the preparation of nabis. So according to a narration by Abdullah ibn Umar, the Prophet explicitly prohibited the use of gourds and jugs smeared with pitch for making this drink.
Wait, specific containers?
Yeah.
That seems incredibly specific. What was the reasoning behind this prohibition?
Well, the Muwatta doesn't explicitly state the reason for this prohibition,
Mm,
leaving it open to interpretation. And this is precisely, I think, what makes studying these texts so captivating,
right.
because it invites us to delve deeper, to research the historical context, to consider, different perspectives. It sparks this intellectual curiosity and encourages us to engage in critical thinking
I love that.
rather than just, passively accepting information.
It's like a detective novel for Islamic knowledge.
Oh, exactly.
We have to piece together the clues
Right.
to uncover the deeper meaning.
Right.
So what are some possible explanations then for this prohibition on these specific containers?
So one theory is that it might have been related to the potential for contamination, right?
Yep.
So gourds and pitch-smeared jugs, especially in the hot climate of the Arabian Peninsula, could have been prone to bacterial growth, which might have affected the quality and the safety of the drink.
That makes a lot of sense, especially considering, the limited understanding of hygiene and food preservation back then.
Yeah.
So, it shows a concern for the well-being of the community, right?
Yeah.
And this desire to prevent potential harm,
Right.
even if the scientific understanding behind it wasn't fully developed yet.
And this emphasis on hygiene and purity is a recurring theme in Islamic teachings, right?
Yeah.
Extending to various aspects of life, from ritual purification before prayer to dietary guidelines.
Right.
So this seemingly specific prohibition on containers, it could be seen as a part of a broader emphasis on cleanliness and health.
It's a really insightful connection. It really highlights how these seemingly isolated rulings can be linked back to broader principles
Right.
and themes within Islamic teachings.
Yeah, it's like a tapestry where each thread,
Contributes to the overall beauty and complexity of the design.
I like that. Yeah. What else could it be?
Well, another possible explanation for this prohibition could be, something symbolic, right?
Yeah.
So perhaps gourds and pitch-smeared containers, they were associated with certain pre-Islamic rituals or beliefs
Oh, interesting.
that Islam sought to distance itself from.
So it's about establishing a distinct Islamic identity,
Right.
even in these everyday practices, like preparing a drink.
Absolutely.
It's about consciously choosing to align oneself with Islamic principles
Yes.
and distancing oneself from practices that might be considered incompatible.
Exactly. And this was a crucial aspect, I think, of the early Muslim community, right? They
Yeah.
were forging this new path, establishing a new way of life based on the teachings of Islam.
Right.
So even seemingly minor practices like choosing specific containers for drinks, it could have been imbued with this symbolic meaning.
Right. Representing a conscious break from the past and a commitment to the new Islamic way of life.
Wow, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like peeling back these layers of history and uncovering the deeper significance behind these seemingly mundane practices. It really makes you realize how everything, even the smallest details, can be infused with meaning and intention.
And that's the beauty, I think, of studying Islamic texts like the Muwatta, right?
Yeah.
They offer us this window into the past, allowing us to understand the mindset, the values, the challenges faced by early Muslims.
Right.
And in doing so, they provide us with valuable insights that we can apply to our own lives, today.
Yeah, it's a reminder that Islamic teachings aren't just about these abstract concepts or rituals, but they're about guiding us in every aspect of our lives, even in something as simple as choosing a container for our drinks.
Absolutely. It's about, living a life that is infused with Islamic principles, where every action, no matter how small, is an opportunity to reflect those values and connect with the divine.
So we've uncovered some fascinating insights into the had for wine drinking.
Yeah.
And the intriguing prohibitions regarding nebbiz preparation.
Absolutely.
But there's still so much more to explore.
Right.
So in the next part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
we'll delve into the heart of the matter,
Okay.
which is the absolute prohibition of wine in Islam.
Okay.
And we'll uncover the stories, the reasoning,
Right.
the profound implications of this pivotal ruling. So stay tuned.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
I'm ready.
Me too.
All right. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Muwatta Imam Malik, Book 42, where we're exploring the Islamic perspective on beverages. In the last segment, we were talking about, the had for wine drinking and the really intriguing guidelines about the preparation of nabiz.
Yeah.
But now we're going to turn our attention to the absolute prohibition of wine in Islam, a topic that's been, the subject of much discussion and debate throughout history.
It is interesting how the Muwatta doesn't just come out and say, wine is forbidden,
Right.
but kind of weaves this prohibition into like a tapestry of narratives,
Uh-huh.
anecdotes, and legal pronouncements.
Yeah, yeah, it makes it so much more engaging
Yeah.
and thought-provoking, right? It's not just this dry legal document,
Right.
but a rich exploration of Islamic values and principles.
Yeah, and it's almost like we're being invited to step into the world of early Muslims
Yeah.
and witness firsthand how these teachings were understood and applied
Right.
in their daily lives. And that makes it so much more relatable.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like we're living it with them in a sense.
Exactly. And one of the most striking aspects of this whole section is the clarity with which the prohibition of wine is presented.
Mm.
There's no ambiguity, no room for interpretation.
Yeah.
It's a firm and definitive stance.
Right.
And one of the most powerful examples of this is a narration by Aisha, the Prophet's wife,
Uh-huh.
when she's asked about mead,
Right.
which is a honey-based alcoholic drink. She simply states,
Okay.
any drink which intoxicates is haram.
Wow. That is such a powerful statement, in its simplicity and its scope.
Yeah.
It just cuts through any potential loopholes or any attempts at rationalization.
Yep.
And it establishes this universal principle. Intoxication, regardless of the source, is forbidden in Islam.
It's like a guiding light, illuminating the path for Muslims.
Yeah.
And leaving no doubt about where Islam stands on this matter.
Yeah, and it's also fascinating to consider the context in which Aisha made this statement, right? She was known for her intelligence, her deep understanding of Islamic teachings, and her role as a trusted source of knowledge for the community.
Right.
So her pronouncements carried significant weight, shaping the understanding of Islamic law and practice for generations to come.
It's amazing to think about the impact her words had shaping the course of Islamic history and influencing the lives of millions of Muslims across time and space.
Yeah, her statement serves as this cornerstone for understanding the Islamic perspective on intoxicating beverages.
Absolutely. And this clarity is further reinforced through other narrations and stories recounted in the Muwatta.
Right.
And one such story involves a drink called al-Gubaira,
Okay.
which was an intoxicant.
Uh-huh.
And when the Prophet was asked about this particular drink,
Yeah.
his response was very straightforward.
Okay.
He said there is no good in it and proceeded to forbid it.
Right. What's so striking about this hadith is its directness and lack of ambiguity, right?
Yeah.
The Prophet doesn't engage in these lengthy explanations or
Yeah.
justifications.
Yep.
He just simply declares it to be devoid of any good and prohibits its consumption.
It's like drawing a line in the sand,
Yes.
leaving no room for doubt or debate.
Right, and it highlights the Prophet's authority as a source of guidance and his role in establishing these clear boundaries for the Muslim community.
Absolutely. And this emphasis on clarity is further underscored by another profound saying attributed to the Prophet. He stated that whoever drinks wine in this world and does not repent before death,
Okay.
it will be haram for them in the next world as well.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
Right.
It adds this whole other dimension to the prohibition, extending its implications beyond this earthly life.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that our actions in this world have consequences that reach far beyond our immediate experiences.
Exactly. This saying underscores the interconnectedness of this life and the next in Islamic belief.
Right.
So our choices, our actions, our attitudes in this world have ramifications for our eternal well-being.
It's a call to accountability.
Yeah.
And a reminder to really align our lives with that divine guidance.
It also emphasizes the importance of repentance, right?
Yeah.
So even if someone has, transgressed this prohibition, the door to forgiveness and redemption remains open through sincere repentance and a commitment to change.
Absolutely.
This highlights the mercy and the compassion at the heart of Islam, even in the face of serious transgressions.
Right. It shows how Islam balances justice with mercy, offering a path to redemption even for those who have strayed.
Absolutely.
And this emphasis on repentance underscores the transformative potential of faith and the belief that it's never too late to turn back to God and seek forgiveness.
That's a beautiful point. So we have Aisha's clear statement, the direct prohibition of al-Gubaira, and this profound saying about the eternal consequences of drinking wine without repentance.
Right.
It really paints this this compelling picture of the absolute nature of this prohibition in Islam.
And it leaves no room for doubt about the gravity of the matter
Yes.
and the importance of adhering to this divine guidance.
But the Muwatta goes even further,
Yeah.
providing detailed accounts and historical context that really flesh out the prohibition's practical implications and social dimensions.
Okay.
And Section 5, which is aptly titled General Section on Wine Being Made Haram, dives deep into this aspect.
I like this section because it moves beyond just the simple statement of prohibition and really delves into like the nuances of how this ruling played out in real life situations.
Yeah, it's like watching a documentary about the early Muslim community.
Right.
You know, observing their struggles, their triumphs, and their unwavering commitment to upholding Islamic principles.
And one of those captivating stories in this section involves a man who brought a gift of wine to the Prophet.
Okay.
And it seems like he was unaware of the ruling prohibiting wine, so it kind of highlights the fact that this prohibition was relatively new at the time.
Right, right.
So the man, out of respect and custom, brings this wine as a gift to the Prophet, not realizing that this is no longer acceptable in Islam.
Yeah, and the story is so important because it captures that transition period when the prohibition was being established.
Right.
It took time for new rulings to be disseminated, understood, and integrated into the fabric of society.
Right. It didn't happen overnight. These changes.
Yeah.
But the Prophet's response in this situation is incredibly instructive. He immediately informs the man that Allah has made wine haram.
Right.
Making it clear that this is no longer a permissible practice.
And his approach is both firm and compassionate, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't reprimand the man for his ignorance, but gently educates him about this new ruling.
Yeah.
It highlights the importance of patience, understanding, and gradual education in the process of implementing Islamic teachings.
It's a really powerful lesson for anyone, I think, involved in teaching or communicating about Islam. It's not about forcing compliance, but fostering understanding, right?
Right.
Guiding people towards the truth with wisdom and compassion.
Absolutely. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe to ask questions,
Yes.
to learn, and to grow in their understanding of Islam without feeling judged or condemned.
And the story gets even more interesting because the man, upon learning about the prohibition, tries to find a way around it.
Oh.
He's like, well, can I sell it then?
Interesting.
If I can't consume it, at least I can profit from it.
Yeah, that's a natural human reaction, right?
Yeah.
When we're faced with a new restriction, we often try to find loopholes
Right.
or alternative ways to achieve our desired outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
But the Prophet's response to this request is incredibly clear
Yeah.
and leaves no room for such maneuvering.
He basically says the one who made drinking it haram has also made selling it haram.
No loopholes, no exceptions.
It highlights the comprehensive nature of the prohibition. It's
Right.
not just about personal consumption,
Uh-huh.
but it extends to any involvement in the production,
Yeah.
distribution,
Right.
trade of wine.
It's like a complete severing of ties
Yeah.
with this substance.
And this decisiveness is reflected in the man's subsequent actions.
Hmm.
So realizing the gravity of the matter,
Mhm.
he immediately opens the wineskins and pours out their contents,
Wow.
demonstrating his acceptance of the ruling and his commitment to following it.
That's an incredibly symbolic act.
Right.
It's a public display of repentance.
A tangible break from the past.
And it shows how deeply these teachings impacted the hearts and minds of early Muslims, leading to these immediate and decisive changes in their behavior.
Yeah. It highlights the sincerity of their faith
Right.
and their willingness to sacrifice
Yeah.
personal gain for the sake of following divine guidance.
They didn't try to rationalize it or justify their actions. They simply obeyed, even when it meant giving up something they previously enjoyed or profited from.
Right.
And it's really inspiring.
It really is. Their unwavering commitment to following the teachings of Islam
Yeah.
is a testament to the power of faith
Yeah.
and the transformative impact it can have on one's life.
And this commitment is further exemplified in the next story, which features Anas ibn Malik, a close companion of the Prophet.
Okay.
And he recounts this incident where he's serving wine to some prominent figures,
Okay.
including Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, Abu Talha al-Ansari, and Umayy ibn Ka'b.
Wow. So imagine that scene, right?
Yeah. These were some of the most respected figures in the early Muslim community, gathered together, perhaps discussing matters of importance.
Right.
It highlights the fact that drinking wine was a socially acceptable practice at the time, even among those close to the Prophet.
Exactly. It underscores the fact that these prohibitions were a significant departure
Right.
from existing social norms.
Right.
But what makes this story so powerful is what happens next.
Okay.
So as they're enjoying their drinks,
Uh-huh.
someone arrives and announces that wine has been made haram.
Oh, wow. Talk about a mood killer.
Right. So what does Anas ibn Malik do?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
He grabs the jugs of wine and smashes them to pieces.
Wow.
This act of immediate and decisive action really speaks volumes about the reverence and obedience that early Muslims had for the Prophet's teachings.
Amazing. It shows how deeply they respected the Prophet's authority and how quickly they responded to his guidance.
There was no debate, no questioning, no attempt to finish their drinks.
Mhm.
They just acted upon the ruling, demonstrating their unwavering commitment to aligning their lives with Islamic teachings.
It's a powerful reminder that true faith requires not just belief,
Right.
but action.
Yeah.
It's about embodying the principles we believe in and making choices that reflect our commitment to those principles.
And this commitment to following divine guidance, even when it meant abandoning previously accepted practices, is beautifully illustrated in the next story featuring Umar ibn al-Khattab,
Okay.
the second caliph of Islam.
Umar ibn al-Khattab, known for his justice, his wisdom, and his unwavering commitment to upholding Islamic law.
And this particular story takes place in Asham, a region known for its heavy air, and the belief that a specific drink helped alleviate the discomfort caused by that air quality.
That's an interesting detail about the heavy air.
Right.
It highlights that this wasn't simply a matter of, people seeking pleasure or indulging in something harmful.
Right.
They believed they had this genuine need
Right.
for this drink.
It adds a layer of complexity to the situation.
Right.
It wasn't like, oh, we just want to get drunk.
No.
It's like, no, we have this actual need for this drink.
It had medicinal properties.
Right.
And helped them cope with the environmental challenges of the region.
Exactly. So they approach Umar with their concern,
Okay.
complaining about the bad air and their reliance on this particular drink.
Right.
They're basically looking to him for guidance on how to reconcile their need for relief with this new prohibition.
Yeah. And Umar, being the wise and compassionate leader that he was, he listens to their concerns.
Yeah.
And even suggests an alternative. A honey preparation.
Yeah.
He's trying to find this solution that addresses their needs
Yeah.
while remaining within the boundaries of Islamic law.
It's a really good example of his leadership style.
Yeah.
It wasn't dismissive of their concerns
No.
or just rigidly enforcing rules without considering the context.
He's trying to find a practical and compassionate solution.
Right, exactly.
But the people, they insist that honey doesn't provide the same relief as their usual drink.
Right.
And they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, torn between their perceived need
Yeah.
and their desire to adhere to Islamic teachings.
It's a dilemma that I think many Muslims face even today.
Right.
How do we reconcile our personal needs and desires
Mm-hmm.
with the principles of our faith, especially when those needs seem to conflict with specific rulings?
It's this constant process of learning,
Right.
seeking knowledge,
Yeah.
and making choices that align with our values even when it's difficult.
Right. And sometimes that requires seeking guidance from those who are more knowledgeable.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what happens in this story, right?
Mhm.
A man from the region steps forward
Okay.
and proposes this compromise.
Okay.
He's like, well, what if we prepare a version of this drink that doesn't intoxicate,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
right? It seems like a reasonable request,
Yeah.
a way to bridge the gap
Uh-huh.
between their needs and the prohibition.
It's an attempt to find this middle ground, right?
Yeah.
A solution that honors both the spirit and the letter of the law.
Right. And Umar, being the open-minded and thoughtful leader that he
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
agrees to try it.
Okay.
So they prepare this drink, they cook it down until 2/3 of it evaporates.
Okay.
And they're left with this concentrated liquid that presumably no
Yeah.
longer has those intoxicating properties.
It's fascinating, this example of early Muslims, experimenting with different methods
Yeah.
to create these permissible alternatives
Yeah.
to prohibited substances.
It's a reminder that Islamic teachings aren't meant to be rigid
Right.
or oppressive.
Yeah.
There's a flexibility there and a willingness to adapt
Right.
to different circumstances
Yeah.
while upholding those core principles.
And even after testing this new drink and confirming that it's no longer intoxicating,
Right.
Umar doesn't just give it this blanket approval. He's cautious about about overstepping his bounds and declaring something halal that Allah might have made haram.
And this demonstrates his deep respect for the divine law,
Uh-huh.
right, and his understanding of his own limitations.
Yeah, he acknowledges that, it's essentially a concentrated fruit juice,
Right.
but he doesn't explicitly declare it permissible.
Yeah.
He even compares it to, like, a medicinal paste used on camels, implying that it might be okay for medicinal purposes, but refraining from making, like, a definitive ruling.
Right. It's a very nuanced approach
It is.
that balances compassion and understanding
Yeah.
with a deep respect for that divine law.
It highlights the importance of seeking knowledge, consulting with experts, and exercising caution when dealing with matters that could potentially cross that line between halal and haram.
And it's a lesson that resonates even today,
Yeah.
reminding us to approach such matters with humility, seeking guidance from those who are knowledgeable, and refraining from making pronouncements without proper authority.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And finally, we come to the last story in this section. A powerful account featuring Abdullah ibn Umar,
Okay.
the son of the second caliph, known for his piety and his strict adherence to Islamic teachings.
Uh-huh.
In this story, he's approached by some men from Iraq who tell him about their practice of buying fruit, pressing it into wine, and then selling it.
And here, this is where we see the full force of Abdullah ibn Umar's disapproval
Right,
of any involvement with wine.
right,
His response is not just a simple statement of prohibition,
yeah,
but it's this passionate condemnation,
yeah.
this forceful rejection of anything associated with this intoxicating drink.
It's like he's drawing a line in the sand and saying, I'm absolutely opposed to this.
Yes.
And everything it represents.
And to add weight and gravity to his declaration,
Yeah.
he calls upon Allah, the angels, and any jinn or human who hears him to bear witness to his words.
Right. It's not just a casual conversation.
No.
It's this formal declaration of his stance
Yes.
on this issue.
Right.
And he wants that to be recorded, to be remembered.
And then comes this powerful command. I order you not to buy it, nor sell it, nor to press it, nor to drink it, nor to give it to people to drink.
It's this all-encompassing prohibition
It is.
covering every aspect of involvement with wine.
Right. It's this total rejection of the substance.
Yeah.
This clear message that there's no room for compromise or negotiation when it comes to this particular issue.
And he doesn't stop there. He goes on to call wine something impure from the work of shaitan,
Wow.
explicitly linking it to evil and impurity.
That's powerful language that leaves no doubt about his stance.
Right. It's not just a matter of personal preference or
No.
cultural norm.
It's a matter of spiritual purity.
Yes.
And aligning oneself with the divine will.
And it's a reminder that our choices have spiritual consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And indulging in things that are considered haram can taint our hearts and distance us from God.
And this final condemnation really serves as this fitting end to this section, summarizing the overall message. Wine and other intoxicating drinks are absolutely forbidden in Islam.
Yeah.
And any involvement in their production, distribution, or consumption is considered a serious transgression.
It's powerful,
Yeah.
unambiguous.
A message that has resonated throughout Islamic history and continues to guide Muslims today.
This exploration of the prohibition of wine in Islam has been incredibly enlightening.
Yeah.
I mean, we witnessed the clarity of the rulings, the compassion in their implementation,
Mm-hmm.
and the unwavering commitment of early Muslims to upholding these teachings.
But this is just one aspect
Right.
of the Muwatta's rich tapestry of knowledge.
Exactly.
And in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to reflect on the broader implications of these teachings,
Okay.
exploring what they reveal about Islamic values and how they can guide us in navigating the complexities of our modern world.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Muwatta Imam Malik, Book 42. We've been navigating this really fascinating world of Islamic perspectives on beverages.
Yeah, we've covered a lot, haven't we? From the had for wine drinking to the super specific guidelines on preparing nabis.
Uh-huh.
And then, wow, that deep dive into the prohibition of wine. What a journey.
It really highlights how comprehensive Islamic teachings are, right? It's not just don't drink this,
Right.
but understanding the why behind it, the ethics, the social impact, the spiritual side of it all.
Yeah, it's like we've been peeling back these layers of a really intricate tapestry
I like that.
and seeing how Islamic principles are woven through every aspect of life.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what are some of the bigger lessons we can take away from all this? What insights does it give us into the Islamic worldview and how we can live our lives today?
One thing that really stuck out to me was this focus on purity.
Mm.
both physically and spiritually,
That's a really good point. The Nabi's guidelines, which containers to avoid, the focus on cleanliness, it all points to this deep concern for purity.
It's not just avoiding what's physically bad for you, right?
Mm.
It's about cultivating a pure spiritual state,
Right.
aligning our actions with Islamic principles, and trying to live a life that's pleasing to God.
And that pursuit of purity, it goes beyond just our actions. It's our thoughts, our intentions, even what we choose to consume.
Yeah, what we put into our bodies and minds has a huge impact on our spiritual state.
Absolutely. So it's a reminder to be mindful, to make choices that nourish our souls and bring us closer to God.
Another big takeaway for me was this emphasis on mindfulness and awareness, especially when it comes to the impact of our actions.
Yeah, the discussions about the had for wine drinking, the prophet's sayings about its eternal consequences, those were really powerful.
It's not just following rules blindly. It's about understanding the wisdom behind them, considering the harm certain actions can cause to ourselves and others.
It's about developing a sense of accountability,
Yes.
recognizing that our choices have these ripple effects that go way beyond just us.
And that mindfulness should guide us in everything we do.
Hmm.
How we interact with people, our health, our finances, even our relationship with the environment.
Absolutely.
The stories we discussed also highlighted obedience to divine guidance and getting knowledge from the right sources.
Yeah, the way early Muslims reacted when they learned about the prohibition of wine, how they immediately abandoned their old ways, that showed their deep respect for the Prophet's teachings
Yeah.
and their commitment to following divine guidance.
It's a reminder that true faith isn't just what you believe, but what you do.
Right.
It's about living by those principles.
And that takes continuous learning, seeking knowledge from reliable sources, really striving to understand the nuances of Islamic teachings.
The story of Umar ibn al-Khattab in Ash-Sham was so insightful for that, wasn't it?
It was. His cautious approach, listening to the people, consulting others, and then ultimately deferring to divine law.
Yeah.
It showed how important it is to seek knowledge, to be wise, and to recognize that we don't know everything.
It's a lesson in humility, reminding us that even when we have good intentions, things can go wrong. And it's always best to be careful when we're dealing with things that could be halal or haram. Finally, I think what we learned today emphasizes justice, accountability, and creating a fair and ethical society.
Yeah, the idea of had these fixed punishments might seem harsh to us now, but it reflects a deep concern for justice, stopping wrongdoing, protecting people's rights.
It reminds us that our actions have consequences, and we are responsible for the choices we make.
Building a just and ethical society takes all of us working together, committing to those moral values, and holding ourselves accountable.
So wrapping up our deep dive into the Muwatta Imam Malik, Book 42, it's clear how deep and rich Islamic teachings are.
They're not just rules, they're a guide for a meaningful life, a life that's aligned with divine principles, a life that benefits us, our communities, and the whole world.
It's a call to cultivate purity in every aspect of our lives, to be aware of the impact of our actions, to seek knowledge from the right places, and to strive for justice in everything we do.
These teachings might be centuries old, but they're still relevant today, offering guidance and wisdom for navigating this complex world we live in.
We hope this deep dive has made you curious and inspired you to keep exploring Islamic knowledge.
And may your desire to learn and your commitment to living a life guided by Islamic principles continue to grow.
Until next time, may peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.